Hello and welcome to the November 23rd bug triage meeting for Operator SDK. Looks like this is going to be a pretty light meeting. It's the week of Thanksgiving after all, but got a couple things to work through. First up, can we use Spock Groovy for testing Operator SDK operator functional tests? Let's see if I can get this log out of the way. Whoever that's typing, could you mute yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So this is like testing an operator itself?
I think it's asking just whether you can run like an end-to-end test using some sort of external scripting language. I mean, the answer is obviously yes. You can do whatever you want.
I'm not familiar with either of these tools.
Groovy is a scripting language. That's all I know. I would just respond saying, yeah, you can use whatever testing harness that you want. I don't know what else to say.
I guess the answer could be that we actually have this scenario covered in our scorecard tests where you supply a custom image and you just give us the entry point. So that image could run, whatever you want. Just a little bit more specific to the ask because they're asking for functional tests and our tooling for that is scorecard, right?
Yeah, we have a document online on how to write a scorecard test with any language in theory. That the example is in Go, but it's pretty well laid out. So I guess we could just link to that or something. Would that be?
I can respond to this guy. So I'll assign myself and I guess just throw this in the backlog.
I mean, this is just a docs issue, right? Or even not a docs issue.
Yeah, I don't think it's even an issue. I think it's just we gotta, I guess, give this person a little bit of a pointer because I don't think there's any changes we have to make to our docs.
So I've seen a few people ask questions about functional tests. In people's experience, does that mean end to end?
Well, it's more like a functional test from a black box perspective, right? So I think what you want as an author is you want to deploy your operator and you want to start off where your operator is running and healthy. And then you want to use some of its APIs and see if it's doing the right thing. So
Sorry, Daniel.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a little late to the game, so I apologize for that, but dialing in at probably the right time. I actually have a deep experience with Spock, provide training on it and such. If you want, I can handle this, but part of understanding this, which I haven't looked at yet, is Spock can be used and often is used as a BDD tool as more unit and integration tests, but it is also commonly integrated with Jeb, which is essentially a Groovy, a wrapper around Selenium, and it can be used for end-to-end. So it's a little bit of, what are they after? What are they trying to do? It is potentially possible, but it doesn't fit into the ecosystem terribly well, especially when you're referring to Go, unless you're using it from an end-to-end perspective.
Well, I mean, theoretically, couldn't they just write their scorecard tests in Spock, and that would just be what the image that scorecard runs is?
As I said, it depends what their intentions are and what they're looking for, and what people mean by certain words like end-to-end or functional. Again, the word functional commonly is affiliated with Jeb, and it's oftentimes that someone might use Spock as their runtime, their test runtime tool around Jeb.
Cool. Would you mind if I assigned you to this, Ken?
I'll handle it. Yeah, I'll handle it. Thanks. Yep.
And then are we just going to throw this in the backlog or?
Yeah, for right now, and I'll close it out if it doesn't make any sense. I don't actually expect this will go anywhere, but if But regardless, backlog probably makes sense to me.
I mean, my
Can you put,
expectation is just talk to him about it, point him to the docs for writing scorecard tests, and that'll probably be it.
Agreed.
Can you put a triage support label on this?
I'm sorry, which one?
Support.
Triage support.
Anything else on this one?
This would be the kind of question I would expect if if we were talking Java, not Go, but I don't think there's anything more to follow up on this.
How to get webhook OLM integration right?
Right. We've had a few questions about this, and the gist of it is not exactly straightforward how to configure your bundle with webhooks if you have webhooks present in your operator project. And this is for Go, by the way. I made a KubeCon demo that detailed doing this. And I've also commented all the way at the bottom with the pretty simple setup at how to figure this out. Because it's not straightforward and it's not, it doesn't happen right out of the box. I think there are some improvements that can be made around this, but luckily the quote unquote workaround is very straightforward as of right now.
So I don't quite understand. Is this guy trying to add a webhook to his operator where the webhook goes and does OLM stuff? Or is he just writing a webhook that does something, some part of the operator functionality and trying to keep it updated with OLM?
More or less the latter. OLM will create and manage admission and conversion webhooks for your operator. So they are trying to add their webhooks to the bundle and by implication the CSV and actually get them to be deployed correctly with OLM. And it's the like crux of the issue is how do I configure the customized build output to add the correct webhook ports to the CSV.
So is this a deficiency
not
on
exactly
the
straightforward.
side?
What's that?
Is this something we can improve on the SDK side?
Yeah, I think so. We've done a decent amount of work with improving the webhook experience with generating a bundle recently. The last thing, which is what this person is talking about, is configuring the operator deployment with these webhook ports. And we can, yeah, I need to look into what the SDK can do a little bit more around this, but the answer is yes, there is more that we can do.
Hey, Eric, for some reason, and anyone else may be able to correct me if I'm wrong on this too, but for some reason I thought I learned a while back that declaring ports on the containers within the deployment or any pod spec is not, like, it doesn't actually do anything. It's almost just informational. I don't know if that's true, but for some, at one point I thought that was true. So we might want to check and make sure, like, is it actually necessary for there to be ports in the pod specs of the deployment if we have the pod listening on the right ports and also a service that targets those ports. You know what I mean?
I don't know anything about whether they're just informational or not, but if I remember correctly, what the SDK does is not use them informationally and actually matches up the ports in a container against a bunch of different webhook services, and then we'll add the appropriate ports to the CSV by doing that.
Okay, so we are reading what's in the deployment to figure out what to put in the CSV. Are you talking about in the webhook configuration of the CSV or the deployment spec portion of the CSV?
The deployment.
So we read the deployment as it's passed in, and where are we, so we're taking the ports out of the deployment as it's passed in, or we're adding ports to the deployment when it's passed in?
We're not adding anything to the deployment. We're just reading from the deployment to match against the webhook service, the service that's used for webhooks, so that we can get the correct ports from that service and
then we
add
put
them
those
to the
ports in
CSV with the
webhook config.
webhook definitions.
Got it.
What's that?
Okay, so let me review one more time to make sure I'm getting it. So we've got, when we pass stuff into the CSV or the bundle generator, I think is when this is, right? We read the deployment, we read the services, and we kind of bang those together to figure out what ports go with the webhook server. And then we put those in the webhook configuration in the CSV.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, so for us, the ports in the deployment spec are informational because we need to read those and compare them to the services.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is there some way we know, like what if, like, are we looking at the name webhook server, or like, is there something specific that we're looking for that says, oh, this is a webhook server port?
Yeah, I think it is the target port has to match a port on the webhook service for the webhook to actually be served by that service correctly. There's some sort of like required mapping that's going on there.
How do we know which service is the webhook service?
We just run through all of the services and do some smart matching on that target port. Like it will deterministically, like it will determine. Sorry, go ahead.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is like, what's the thing that we know we can match against?
I'm pretty sure it's the target port because it's like an int string and it needs to match the inter string that's on the service.
I guess I'm still confused. So if someone has, an operator that maybe they've developed outside of Operator SDK, but they're still using our bundle generator, for instance.
Yeah.
And they have some who knows what service pointing to, running on 443 pointing to 9443, and has nothing to do with a webhook server. How do we know?
So then in the webhook configuration, the configured service that that webhook is using will not point to those ports.
Okay, so
it's a combination. Yeah, it's a combination of like the webhook configuration, the deployment, and the service.
Okay. So we've got a webhook config as well that's piped into us. That's the thing that we're like, okay, we need to figure out. We're going to look at this and figure out what the ports are that are configured in the webhook configuration, and then we're going to look for those things in the deployment and the service.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I kind of understand what you're asking though. You're like, why do we need like one of those levels of indirection? And I believe it is because there does need to be, let me think. Oh, it has something to do with the deployment name field in the webhook definitions in the CSV. So like technically you could have multiple deployments in a CSV for your operator. And so one of those deployments needs to include the webhook service. Otherwise OLM can't actually create any webhook configurations. They won't be served by any webhook servers. So you need to find the deployment name for the deployment that matches that has the matching ports for a service, and then that service gets mapped to webhook configuration.
This might be, I think I get where this is going. This almost sounds like a poor API from the OLM side. And maybe there's a good reason for it that I don't understand, but I don't know why they need to know the deployment name. Like if, as far as I remember, the webhook, the actual validating webhook thing just says like, tell me what service I'm supposed to use.
Hi, I'm from the OLM team and I wrote this feature so I could
Oh, perfect.
help. Yeah, so OLM manages the cert rotation right now that you need to mount on into the deployment for the webhook. And because of that, we need to know when you define a webhook, which deployment needs to have the certs generated and mounted to.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Okay.
So yeah,
we
thanks.
eventually go to move it using, you know, like something like I can't remember the name of the
Cert managers?
Cert Manager. That's it. Yes. So if we eventually adopt Cert Manager as a way to manage our stuff, we may be able to lessen some of the information that we need to provide, but we just haven't done that yet.
Yeah, that makes
Right.
sense now. Thanks for refreshing my memory.
Yeah, I definitely think that was worth stepping through to inform everybody on the call why this is so complicated and why these 3 steps that I've listed here are necessary. But yeah, I think there are some things that we can do to improve the onboarding experience for creating a bundle for an operator that has webhooks, where you do basically exactly what we have in the documentation, which is create your operator project, create your APIs, and then run make bundle, and you're good to go. Instead of having to do these 3 in between steps.
Okay.
So you can assign that to me and throw that in the backlog because it's a question. I don't think there's any immediately actionable items that are coming from this, but yeah, maybe I'll come back to this in a little bit after thinking about what else we can do. I have some ideas. I don't exactly have time to implement them, so I'll make a comment with those ideas on here.
Is this a bug? Like, do we expect that this all just, well, let me make a statement. I think we expect that if you add webhooks to your operator and then you run make bundle, that you'll get a bundle that quote unquote just works. And maybe we don't have all the features in place for that, but I guess I'm wondering, like, the way that we've documented the make bundle feature, I think we give people the impression that it should work. So do we want to say that this is a bug?
You could call it a bug, yes.
I would second that opinion, Joe.
Thanks, Daniel.
So you want to throw a bug label on there?
Anything else on this one? How to watch for metadata changes with an Ansible-based operator. So they made an Ansible operator, added something to the watches. It's right.
This may be, if I remember correctly, both the Helm and Ansible operators, when they specify watches for the main watch, which in this case would be the ingress, we always use a couple of predicates that may filter out some of these events. In general, you want that for CRs, I think. And different resources behave differently. Like sometimes, you know, updates in one section result in a generation change, and sometimes they don't, or resource version or something like that. And I never this may just be, this may be an oversight in terms of handling core resources differently than like CRD APIs, but I don't know for sure. We don't have any of the Ansible experts here on the call, I don't think. So if anyone knows more details than I do, then chime in, but I guess I don't know for sure what the answer to this is. We may have a feature that's part of Ansible Operator that lets you configure some of that stuff. I would probably say, without any more info from anyone else, maybe we just let this ride for another week, and maybe we can ping Austin on it. So when he gets back from vacation, he can take a look at it.
I guess it would also be good to understand what the use case is. So they are looking at ingress here. So I guess there are some operators that reconcile ingress based on metadata changes.
Yeah, my guess would be the metadata. So if you look at ingress, a lot of them are configured based on annotations, right? Like every ingress controller has its own whole thing of annotations associated with it. So my guess would be that this thing is like, I want to have a controller of ingresses that looks at the annotations, and if something in there does something I expect, then, you know, it's basically an ingress controller, right?
Yeah. The thing that worries me here is that it says it's only triggered off the spec section changes. I actually haven't verified, but if that's true, that would probably be a fairly severe limitation, because you would definitely want to be able to also reconcile status updates from other operators. So you use that as a communication mechanism.
So again, I think the original thought process for custom resources was we don't, since the controller owns the status, we don't need to re-reconcile ourselves when we update our own status. So I think the default in both Helm and Ansible is ignore status updates.
Yeah, but this is not a custom resource, right? This is another, that's a 4-eyeing API, it's a third-party resource.
Right. So yeah, and so that's what I was saying. It may be just an oversight that when we were designing and writing this, like we weren't, first-party resources were not like the focus. So we might have, you know, added some code in that doesn't quite handle first-party resources as well. I might be wrong. I know that Fabian has done a lot of stuff on similar questions to this. So there might be a escape hatch where there's like a fifth field on the watches.yaml that says to do something different that'll make this work. But I just don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can treat this as a feature request until we uncover it's actually possible, and then we can just update that thing with here's the doc how to do that.
That seems reasonable.
Okay, but in terms of marking it right now, we're just going to leave it and come back to it next week, hopefully when we have.
I would say go ahead and mark it as a feature request, like Daniel suggested, and then we can, if it turns out that's not true, then we can update it at that point. And otherwise, maybe just leave it unassigned and unmilestone, and we can talk about it again next week.
Okay. Anything else on this one? Enable logging to a file. So how do I collect logs from my Ansible operator?
On this one, I'm fairly sure if the verbosity of the Ansible operator itself has increased, you get that log output from Ansible runner in the operator logs.
So you just need to configure it?
I believe this is supported, but again, Ansible operator question, I'm not positive.
Well, do we just want to leave this here for next week then too?
Seems reasonable.
Can admission logic be placed in a separate package when using scaffolded webhooks?
I think this is more of an upstream issue, but if I understood it right, the user has the admission logic implemented in a separate package, and they want to use those helpers in the admission webhook implementation, which we scaffold in webhook.go inside the API folder. So, and that's causing basically a dependency issue. This is
Yeah.
Kind of an upstream issue, but I think the major reason why QBuilder is having webhook.go inside the API folder is because this webhooks is specific to a particular GPK, and that's the reason we don't have.
It's actually, isn't it specific to a specific GK, group kind? Like you can only have one webhook per operator and it has to handle all the versions. And that's probably why it's there.
It needs to be implemented on the type itself. So yeah, more or less. So I just suggested something. Well, I basically said like, no, you really, like, you don't really want to do that. I mean, you can have some external package that implements some like generic validation logic. And that's more or less what I suggested to do. But in general, like, no, you can't really do that, unfortunately. And the main reason is that you have to register your webhook with the manager on the type itself. And there's no way to do that unless it's actually the webhook interfaces are actually implemented on the type.
Yep,
It also looks like
it makes sense to me.
It also looks like they said they just decided to not do what they were wanting to do originally and just put it all into the types or into the API package, which I think is the right thing to do ultimately. I mean, when you're implementing a validating or a mutating webhook, you're dealing directly with fields of a type and making sure that they all match what you expect them to. So having them all in the same package makes sense from a data-driven design perspective.
It sounds like the reason they originally wanted to move it out is because they want to make it extensible for when they implement multiple CR types. I don't, it seems kind of weird to me unless these like.
Well, they should all be in the same package anyway.
It just seems like you were saying, Eric, though, it seems strange that you would have a common implementation of validation that applies to like arbitrary CRs. It seems like you could do it, but you'd have to write an interface that all of the individual types implement such that you could use the interface in your validation.
Yeah. We could probably close this out because they, like, I think I gave an answer that encompasses all the things that we just said here. And they've also said that they are not going to be going ahead with their solution. This is, yeah, I think also like Marcia said, this is upstream and then Go type related, Go import related. So I would close this as resolved. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, that's probably a good enough answer. Control runtime.
Would like to direct them to a place.
Control runtime, probably.
Whatever. I'll type this up and close it out.
Thank you.
That's all the issues we have on the docket today. Is there anything else that people want to talk about?
One announcement is that starting Thanksgiving, I'm going to be out until the beginning of the year. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share? And I think that is it for today.